Okay, Brigid, given the fact that the authors of The Captives of War, James S.A. Corey, chose to spoil the ending of the entire story in the very first paragraphs of the very first book, how can we possibly enjoy talking about this for several episodes, knowing full well how everything happens?
Clint, I am just not sure, but we're going to give it a try.
Push the button.
So this is the very first episode of The Mercy of Pods, which I think is a good name. Brigid, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Brigid. I'm a professional dilettante.
Yes.
I'm someone with so many interests, and right now this is one of them. So I would like to talk about it at length.
Excellent. Love hearing that. My name is Clint. I'm an unprofessional dilettante. That's not really true. I also have lots of interests. I'm also really excited to talk about The Captives of War, The Mercy of Gods. We're going to eventually talk about Live Suit. This is such a cool, fascinating introduction to a sci-fi story, and I'm really excited to get into the sort of ground floor of it with you, one of my best friends ever.
Yes, we are best friends forever.
Biffles.
I'm so excited also to talk about this and get into all the really multi-layered ethical and moral conundrums, and the strategy stuff is really interesting. But I can tell you one thing that's not going to be happening on this pod, and that's arguing, because you cry when you argue. And no, that's me. I cry when I argue. You're a professional arguer.
It's true.
But we just agree about almost everything. So if you're looking for a heated debate, I don't know why I feel the need to warn people, but you're not going to get one here.
We will not be doing much debating, I don't think. I do argue for a living. It is one of my least favorite qualities. So I guess one of the things that we wanted to do is talk a little bit in advance before we get started. We've touched on it a little bit. Why did we choose to cover The Captives of War in a podcast format? And both Brigid and I are big fans of James S.A. Corey and The Expanse series. In fact, I bullied my beloved co-host Brigid into reading all of the Expanse books this year. Brigid, who's your favorite character in The Expanse?
Amos, of course.
Of course. I knew that Brigid would have lots of feels about Amos Burton. My favorite character is Christian Avasarala, of course. Of course. Regardless, I was really excited to pick up The Mercy of Gods once it came out last August, and I loved it. I tore through it. I've read it 3 or 4 times by now. I tore through the Live Suit novella as well. And I think, as Brigid mentioned earlier, this is the type of story, because James S.A. Corey, Ty, and Daniel are such good writers, that gives a lot of opportunity for literary analysis and also personal and political philosophies, and, for engaging in a type of conversation about the work. One of my favorite things has been looking at the Captives of War subreddit, and people are posting so many theories because there are so many open questions about this. I have, of course, the correct theory about what's going on.
Yes.
Right. And I'm going to talk about that at some point, but I've been really interested to see the conversation and engage with it there. It's been great.
This book and Live Suit are two of the best things that I've read, I feel like, especially in sci-fi, and I think it's going to be really cool to dig into them. So what's the plan? What are we doing here?
Great question. I'm glad you asked it. We're going to do at least one episode on each of the 6 parts of The Mercy of Gods. Our first episode is going to be on the very first part. It's in the title, so you probably figured this out. The Mercy of Gods Before, which is the first 6 chapters of The Mercy of Gods. Our next episode will be on the second part of The Mercy of Gods, Catastrophe, and then we'll go from there. Our goal is to publish monthly-ish and to finish both The Mercy of Gods and Live Suit before we get book 2 of The Captives of War sometime next summer. That's, I think, what Ty and Daniel have said is likely going to be the publishing date. And unlike some other authors I could mention, they actually publish on time. which is nice. The other thing that I want to note is this is spoilers all books. So we are going to talk about the first part, but if you haven't read Mercy of Gods from start to finish, we are going to be spoiling the Mercy of Gods. So stop the podcast, I guess, and finish the Mercy of Gods. In the future, I think we are going to be spoiling parts of Live Suit once that becomes relevant. We probably aren't going to be doing that too much in this episode. We probably will be spoiling parts of The Expanse, but we probably won't be doing that too much in this episode. We'll try and point it out. But I think that's the plan. Brigid, anything you want to say about that?
If you are so sensitive to spoilers that the first chapter of a book can spoil the rest of the book for you, then you definitely shouldn't be listening to this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't want to read the Ekur-Tkalal dishy, soapy chapters, all of his whining and moaning the entire time, then I don't know what to tell you, because those are some of my favorite parts of the book.
He is my best friend. I love him.
My God. All right. So that's the plan. Anything else that we want to talk about before we get into the meat?
Let's get into the meat.
The delicious, delicious meat.
The delicious nutrient slurry.
Oh, the other thing we're going to do is, so I wrote a summary of this episode. Next week or episode or whatever it is, or I wrote a summary of this part. Brigid's going to write the summary of the next part. We're going to switch off. That's the plan. Probably won't. I don't know. That's the plan. But so this is my summary.
We'll see how it goes.
Yes. Of The Mercy of Gods, Part 1, Before. Dun, dun, dun. We open with Brigid's best friend, Ekur-Tkalal, doing his best narrator from Romeo and Juliet impression and spoiling the ending within the first 6 lines. In the process, he brushes off the question of how long the Carricks have been fighting the war. Quote, "That is a meaningless question. The Carricks have ruled the stars for epochs." What a great quote. And then he says that the story of their downfall began with the conquest of a meaningless blue dot called Anjiin. Anjiin. How are we pronouncing it?
Let's try to do the canonical Jefferson Mays pronunciation that kind of sounds like Asian. Anjiin.
He swallows the N on it. It's Anjiin. Anjiin. Okay, Anjiin. Yeah. Something like that. That's how Jefferson Mays pronounces it. That's what we're going to do. Anyway, the ending of the Ekur-Tkalal part says, "We did not see our adversary for what he was, and we brought him into our home."
You know, it is impossible to get a straight answer out of these guys.
Yeah, they don't like answering questions. They really don't. You know, like, and we'll see that throughout the book. They're kind of lawyerly about it. About a lot of questions. Then we have a smash cut to Daffod Alcor. It's a Daffod chapter, folks. He is our main character, we think. And he is at a fun little dinner party, chatting up some drunk rando who is sort of yammering on about some light telescopy and deep sensor arrays in space and blah, blah, blah. And Daffod's not really paying attention, but he does manage to talk to this guy enough to pick up that maybe there might be something wrong with the long-term funding of his research group. In the meantime, Daffod sort of makes his way through this dinner party deftly, establishing that despite his apparent youth and lack of expertise, he is a smart political player.
He's smooth like a weasel.
He is smooth like a weasel, indeed. He runs into his politically connected aunt before meeting up with the real reason he came to this little soiree. He sees head scientist / rock star / Daffod's boss, Tonner Freis, who, such an interesting character, Tonner Freis. But more importantly, he sees Tonner's girlfriend and number 2, Else Yannin. And, well, folks, Daffod Alcor has got a little crush on the boss's girl, which is spicy.
Ooh.
Spicy. Daffod's got cojones, as they say, to be hitting on the boss's girl. Our boy is bold. Eventually, he gets Else alone. And there's this quote that I want to highlight. I love it so much. It says, "Small moments, unnoticed at the time, change the fate of empires." That small
Love
moment
that.
of Dafydd getting Else alone at this little party, amazing. And so Dafydd, at this part, he mentions to Else the little exchange with that guy who was talking about the light telescopy that definitely won't come into play later. His name is Lauren Morris. Again, not important. And he mentions the exchange, which gives Else pause. Else is like, why would our funding be in trouble? And in the process, she touches poor Dafydd's arm. And again, a quote. "It felt like an important moment, and it was. Later, when he stood in the eye of a storm that burned 1,000 worlds, he'd remember how it all started with Else Yannen's hand on his arm and his need to give her a reason to keep it there."
Ooh, it's so romantic.
What a great ending for a first chapter. He
Yeah.
stood in the eye of a storm that burned 1,000 worlds. Holy shit. That is some incredible foreshadowing. And did he cause the storm? Is he burning 1,000 worlds? Are the 1,000 worlds being burned by somebody else? Like, we don't know, but what an incredible image to invoke in just the first chapter of the book.
Yeah. It's really beautifully written and quickly throws you into the setting really quickly. I highlighted something that Dafydd's aunt tells him, "You're going to have to impress someone someday," because it felt foreshadowy, and it was.
Sure was. I love that. She was like, "I'm not buying your bullshit. Everyone else is going to buy your bullshit. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I see right through you because I am the same kind of person. I'm a political animal. And you are going to actually have to do something with your life one day." Such a great point. So then we go on, we get a Jessin chapter. Jessin, another one of our favorite characters. And to start, we learn quite a bit more about Anjiin. Humans are not native there, and we get a bit of fascinating backstory about how no one knows how they got there or how they thrived on Anjiin, but they apparently arrived some 3,000 years ago, not alone, but with a whole dang biome with them. They brought trees, human trees, or earth trees rather, all kinds of earth animals, bees and birds and plants and viruses and food. I think there's going to be a lot more on this later, and this plays into my grand correct theory about what's going on. It's just such an interesting little bit of world building detail.
And it's like 1,000 years ago, they think, or more?
I think it was 3,000 years ago. Is the upshot that in the fossil record, it just like 3,000 years ago, just humans pop up with the whole biome.
Yeah, so interesting. It's so complete. It includes fungal mycelium.
Yeah, I mean, seems pretty detailed and interesting. So anyway, we learned from Jessin that Tonner Freis' research group is in charge of reconciling the human biome with the native one on Anjiin. They'd succeeded, a great triumphant success, but now, thanks to Dafydd's inside information, they're finding out that their research group might be in trouble. They might even be split up. Tonner gets the team together to figure out what to do, and we finally meet our other main cast of characters. That includes Jessin, Irina, Cinia and Noel, Rickar, and my best friend forever, Campar. I love him to pieces. We also learn that Jessin has a very close brother named Jellet. They're not twins, but they're very close. That's what we learn about the group.
Bunch of cutie patooties.
Bunch of nice guys. We're going to talk a bunch more about them later. Then from there, we get another Dafydd chapter. The next day, everyone meets at an emergency meeting called by Tonner at the lab. Pleasantries are exchanged. Everybody's waiting around for everybody to show up. There's some rando person nearby who's eating a sandwich. Definitely not important. And Jessin then sort of offhandedly mentions that Jellet is being silly for getting excited about superluminal readings in space. Lol, obviously that's bad data. But then we can get down to the real threat that they're gonna split up the team.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Not the team.
Brigid, you told me what this meant.
Oh yes, so superluminal is not a word I was familiar with, and it means faster than light speed. So was like, is this just something they made up completely that he's excited about? But yes, if you saw something moving faster than light speed in space, you'd be pretty freaked out or think it was bad data.
Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clearing that up.
Thank you, dictionary.com.
There you go. This is what you're listening to this podcast for. We will go to dictionary.com for you.
Yes. I learned a science word so you wouldn't have to.
That's right. So, they're going to split up the team, though. What do we do? How do we stop it? And who sold us down the river? That's the most important question, folks. Everyone eventually comes to the same conclusion. It's probably Rickar, that piece of shit.
That fancy boy Rickar.
Fancy boy Rick.
So it's not totally clear to me how they know, like, what role exactly did Rickar play? It doesn't seem like it has to have been an inside job, but maybe I'm forgetting something.
Okay, so I think that this is how I picked it up after reading this chapter, is that immediately Tonner thinks it's not any of the senior researchers, which includes Tonner, Else, and I think Noel. It's either Cinia or Noel. Those are people who have been around, and it's like, why would you want... You're already topped out, basically, at academia at that point. Making a power play doesn't make sense for those people. And then they figure out it's not Campar, because Campar could have taken another one of those senior researchers' jobs at any point and has turned him down because he's A, the coolest person of all time, and B, really dedicated to this particular group. And then I think that there are other people like Daffyd who are junior researchers who are, it's not going to help them at all. I think,
because they'd still be a junior researcher.
Right.
When the team split up.
And I think Irina kind of falls into that category as well, although they suspect it might be Irina.
Right.
Regardless, Tonner is also looking for a connection between Dian Academy, which is this sort of, I guess, rival academy to Irvian. It's like the Michigan and Ohio State of Anjiin colleges.
Yeah.
I'm putting that out there. I don't know. But that's the idea, is that Rickar's got some sort of connections to Dian Academy, and that's why they think it's Rickar. That by process of elimination, they kind of, it's like, it's not this person, it's Rickar.
Right.
Yeah. Also, Rickar is apparently a dandy boy. He's just a fashion icon, and people are jealous of those people.
He's a fashion icon. They're just jealous of his swag.
Yes. Yeah, so I think those are the conclusions that we can draw. Anyway, while everyone is discussing how to deal with these events, we get our first interjection in the narrative from the Swarm.
The Swarm.
Oh my god, that's a terrifying. You have to do that every time. You have to do that every time.
I will really try.
Okay. Brigid, what do you think about the Swarm?
Oh, I love it so much. I definitely thought it was a bad guy at this moment.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, bugs invading a person or something. That seems bad.
Well, and it still could be a bad guy, right? But I thought it was on the side of the invading army, for sure.
Yeah. There's stuff happening in the sky. That's scary. This is alien nanotechnology that's inside this person. I think this is when we find out that the Swarm's going to leave this vessel behind and kill it.
So we find out that the person who is eating a sandwich nearby is the Swarm. It's one of the things I really like about this narrative is there's not a whole lot of wasted people.
Yeah.
People show up. If people get mentioned, they're important. And that person eating the sandwich was Amir Osted or Amir Kindred.
Yeah.
The Swarm. That was the Swarm. And we find out that it has taken Amir Kindred and that it's sort of using her. We find out that the Swarm has all sorts of sensory abilities and can listen and pick up pheromone scents and all this kind of shit. And there's this quote that comes from a later Swarm chapter, but I want to hit it here, that I think is really, again, wonderful writing. The quote is, "It was built to learn, built for plasticity, its design like water, flowing through whatever channels the universe provides it. It understands now that water also carries what it passes through. It has already traded purity for experience, and there is no path back, nor should there be.
Oh, chills.
Oof, what a great piece of prose.
These lads can really turn a phrase.
Yeah, so the swarm also hears Jellet talking about superluminal readings. Is that the word? Superluminal?
Yes.
Okay. And realizes that their time to act is coming soon. We learn that the swarm is both a mere kindred and not a mere kindred, that it feels and hears her, but is also able to sort of tuck her away and activate those sensors to collect all this data and information about its target group of scientists. And we also learn, of course, that it is targeting this group of scientists for some specific reason, which we find out later and we will get to.
So exciting.
All right. And then we move on.
Mystery.
We've got a Tonner chapter. What's it like? What do you feel like when you're inside the head of Tonner Freis, Brigid? What are the things that come into your mind?
He annoys me. I don't like him. I wish ill upon him. I've worked with people like him and hated them also. Does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's fine. He's a prick. He definitely seems like a prick.
He's very interested in individual recognition for his achievements.
Yes, very much so. And also, he's laser focused on retaining his own spot in society, whatever that spot is.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing. It's a very relatable thing. I'm a lawyer, so I work with lots of those people, but yeah, it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
So we get into this chapter, and what's very funny is like the last chapter was all like, how will we convince Rickar to tell us the truth? And then they just ask him, and Rickar's like, yep, that was me.
I love this part.
And he's like, yeah, I sold the team out. And can you blame me? The writing was on the wall, and, you know, he didn't have a choice but to take advantage. Besides, it wasn't Rickar's call. It was this guy, Samar Osted. Good old Samar, force of nature, that guy. He will definitely be around for a while, as we've talked about. Everybody who gets mentioned is super important.
Yes, commit his name to memory.
Samar Osted. Anyway, Tonner tells Rickar to get the fuck out of his lab, and Rickar leaves. Everybody else talks, and Else, for some reason, seems really concerned with keeping the family together in the short term.
She's such a mother hen, that one. Justice for Rickar. I feel like Tonner takes this super personally, but it isn't at all, and it's not even a bad idea to split up this lab. If the work is this important, it would be a good idea to have a lot of teams working on it. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think Jessen even brings that up and is like, doesn't that make sense? And it kind of does. If the work is that important, then there should be more than one team working on it. And if there isn't, that's silly. That's stupid. Yeah. Strategically and intellectually, like, what if something happens to the lab? What if they all get space COVID at once and have to stop their work for a month? That's right. I mean, it's like the designated survivor thing. You don't want, everybody working in the same place. A meteor could hit it. They could be invaded by aliens. A meteor could hit it. Yeah. So what's up with Else? She's being weird. Great question. We find out some more about Else later when Else and Tonner are alone in Tonner's apartment. Else is on the balcony, gazing at the stars. What could she be looking at? We may never know. And Else and Tonner are talking about their plan. What do? Tonner admits that he's just being a jerk, and he's stressed out. And eventually Else says, okay. He gives Tonner a nice glass of whiskey. Tonner falls into a deep sleep and dreams of trying to get to the lab, but the ground falling out from underneath him. Later, it would seem like a premonition. So that's the end of that chapter. Okay, let's talk about what's going on with Else. What is going on with Else? What a weird girl she's being. What a weird girl she is being. There's a part where she is smoking a cigarette that is marijuana and cloves. Yeah, so apparently, according to Daniel Abraham, there were clues in this scene, like that she stopped smoking that cigarette in the middle. But at first I was like, well, it's normal to stop smoking a spliff in the middle. You might already be high enough. And then I thought, who the fuck is smoking cloves and weed together when cloves feel like smoking fiberglass when you inhale them, and cannabis is meant to be held in the lungs as long as possible.
for maximum THC absorption. So obviously, this is how we know.
This is how we know that Else has been already taken by the swarm. Else has already been taken by the swarm. At this point, Daniel Abraham on Reddit in a Reddit comment confirmed this. So this is canon, folks.
Canon, folks.
And I wouldn't know. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to Brigid about this. I've never smoked anything in my life. My lungs are virgin, and so I wouldn't know what it's like to smoke marijuana or to smoke cloves. My understanding is that smoking cloves is disgusting, and so thank you for confirming that with me.
It doesn't feel good.
Are we sure that Daniel Abraham and or Ty Frank has ever smoked anything?
Not sure at all. These guys might also have virgin lungs.
It's possible. It's possible. Maybe they will post comments on Reddit.
Weigh in.
Yeah, weigh in.
Yeah. If they do smoke weed, dream blunt rotation.
Dream blunt rotation, yes. What is Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank's dream blunt rotation? Please fill us in. The other spoilers that Daniel Abraham mentioned as to why Else was already taken was that Tonner comments several times that he doesn't think he'll be able to sleep, but then falls deeply asleep right after drinking the whiskey that Else prepared for him when he wasn't in the room, so Else drugged his whiskey at that point because she had some stuff that she needed to do, or they had some stuff that they needed to do.
Just a quick errand.
Yes.
Just take 15 minutes.
That's right.
It's on the way.
Our non-binary queen, Else Yanin. And then in the scene with Rickar immediately before, Else is already very focused on not letting the team split up. So
yeah. So apparently we were supposed to be able to put that together that were we supposed to understand from those clues that she was already the swarm?
I don't think so. I mean, I certainly did. I didn't figure out that it was Else until the book revealed that it was Else.
Yeah, I definitely didn't figure it out. I had to be told.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I thought it was Cinia. I did.
Oh.
Because Cinia was acting like aggressively.
Yeah, she was acting weird.
And we don't get a POV with Cinia. So that's what I thought. But
I thought it was Daffod for most of until I was told it wasn't Daffod. A lot of his behavior later also, I was like, that would make sense for the swarm to be doing that.
For sure. So then we get this interlude with the swarm who notes that it has taken on a new host. We don't learn until later that it's Else. And on reread, we know that. And we also see how it's adopting her experiences. We also see or hear from the swarm that it's a new life form, that it hasn't been around for a long time. It says that it's new in the world or new in the universe. And so I have a theory, a very correct theory about what that is. But I think that's interesting to note that this isn't something that's been around for a while. This is something that has been recently triggered into life, right?
Yes. This is an interesting character building moment for the swarm. Because we're already a little worried because we know that it killed Amir on the way out, and it's pretty clear narratively that it's now a member of the team. So we're like, okay, the check is in the mail for someone. And so far, no one in the narrative has died, so it's like, that feels weighty. That felt weighty to me. I don't know. I was like, oh shit, someone's actually gonna get killed by this alien bug thing.
Yeah, it felt weighty to me, and I didn't want it to be one of the people. I didn't want it to be Campar. I was never willing to believe that it was going to be
anybody but Campar.
No, not at all. So, I mean, the swarm notes that it has taken on Elsa's fondness for sweet pickles, a memory of a boy named Eliel, a resignation to the inevitability of death, and then the swarm notes that it is feeling unnerved, and how that is an interesting proposition, that it can feel unnerved, rather. And then anyway, the swarm murders Samar Ostead. Rip Samar.
R.I.P. in pieces, Samar.
Oh, yeah. Deuces. So then we get another Jesson chapter. I really like this chapter on reread. I think it initially you blow past it because it's basically just Jesson talking to Arina, and then Jesson talking to Jellet, and then Jesson being in her own head. And I think that not a whole lot of stuff happens, but there is so much ground being laid about Jesson, but also about the broader structure of this story that I think is really, really important. First, you see Jesson is talking to Arina about what might happen going forward. We get a lot of Jessen's interiority about her own mental illness, which is a big part of this story, and I think really important. We learn that it's something that Jessen has dealt with her entire life. And in fact, her relationship with Jellet, her brother, is foundational in learning how to cope with reality. It's for that reason that she doesn't want to leave Irvian. She can't be away from Jellet because Jellet is basically her rock. It is the person that she can't be away from because Jellet is able to handle Jessen at her worst. Irina then asks Jessen what will happen going forward with everyone. Jessen says basically everyone will be fine. And I think, were it not for the fact that everyone is about to die on this planet, not everyone. Look, I think Jessen was right. Like, everyone was going to be fine. We talked earlier about how it was probably a good idea to split up the group.
Yeah. If it weren't for that dang alien invasion,
I know.
Things would have worked out.
Shucks. But yeah, Jessen says some of them will move on and some of them will stay. All will be successful in various ways. Of course, she says that Noel and Cinia will, quote, die in Irvian. And she is half right about that, which I think.
Jessen is representation for insane genius thick bitches.
Yeah, I would. So
she's also my favorite. She's my favorite of the team for sure. I feel really like connected to her.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Atta girl.
Jessen leaves and runs into Jellet, who is excited about something. Something about what they're picking up in space, the lensing effect. They're seeing something in between infrared and microwave, maybe some matter that seems designed. Again, it's probably bad data. But if it isn't, Jellet says, maybe it's their long-lost brethren coming back to say hi. And spoiler alert, it is not.
It's not.
Sorry, buddy.
They're so frustratingly optimistic.
It's rough. It's rough reading that because Jessen is sort of just like humoring him, just being like, yeah, that sounds interesting. Not really triggering that this is the most important thing to ever happen.
Yeah.
And so then Jessen thinks about her religious upbringing in the Sarentist sect. The Sarentists seem sort of like a mix between Christian and Buddhist, I'm guessing. He talks about a priest, I think. So maybe it's just sort of like their Christianity analog. And a priest once tried to relate to Jessen about being, quote, too much with myself, which is a nice phrase. I feel that hit me deeply when I thought about it. I am often too much with myself. And then the priest tells Jessen a story about existentialism and socks. And then before Jessen goes to bed, she gets a message from Campar that Rip, Samar Ostead, has been killed. Samar Ostead, sorry, buddy.
One of the greats.
Yeah.
I'm so interested in the different religions on Anjiin. I don't think we're going to get too much more world building about the culture there for reasons that become clear shortly. But it would be so cool to know, especially because I think the authors said that the Book of Daniel from the Old Testament is, like, the plot is a big part of the inspiration. Like, this is the Book of Daniel in space, right?
Yep.
So it would be cool to know, like, is it symbolically also infused in the story, or is it, like, the plot mostly? And that will be something that'll be cool to see. My mom is a Catholic scholar, and I asked her about the Book of Daniel, and she said in Catholicism, it's like Revelations, where it's meant to be entirely symbolic and not read literally at all. And there's a lot of stuff in it about Daniel interpreting the king's dreams and predicting the future correctly. And then, of course, the lion's den. The famous story is the Daniel in the lion's den, where God tells the lions not to eat him, so they don't. So I feel like we can sense how that's coming up plot-wise, but I wonder if also, like, Christian mythology infuses the story more broadly.
I think that's a great point. I confess it's been a while since I've read the Book of Daniel, and maybe I need to go back and read it. This book is called The Mercy of Gods, right? They have said the Book of Daniel is one of the primary inspirations for this particular book. So it would not surprise me if the god, who are the Carricks in this, I guess, analogy, eventually convince something not to kill Daffod, much to their dismay later. So I think that's a nice little bookmark to put in it.
Yes. We'll put a pin in that, as they say.
Yeah. So then we get the last chapter of this part, of the before part, and it is a split up chapter. Well, let me ask you this, Brigid. I don't think we've talked about this. So the Expanse books are, each chapter is a POV, right? You don't jump in back and forth with POVs. Sometimes with this book, we get one POV and then sometimes you jump back and forth. How do you feel about that structure?
That's so interesting that you ask, because a lot of people hate what they call POV jumping or perspective jumping. I think that's what they call it.
Okay.
But I don't really mind it. I feel like if the author is, I mean, it depends on execution, obviously. In this case, I don't mind it because it's not that hard to tell who's talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you end up in the most interesting, like they're using it to put the reader in the spot that's going to be most interesting for the reader at any given time.
Yeah, and I can imagine as an author, you're an author. This is one of the reasons, we haven't mentioned this.
Oh, yes, that's true. I am an author.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast with Brigid is I am not a story. I just like stories. I'm not an author. I don't have a creative writing or literature degree like Brigid does. And so, like, I feel I'm a casual here. And so I wanted to pick Brigid's brain about storytelling devices. I think that's interesting. When you write, do you jump back and forth between perspectives, or is it just sort of?
I usually do. Actually, sticking to first person in one person's perspective for a whole novel is really challenging.
Sure.
When I do that, I've done that before, and it's like, you got to get pretty creative about what you're talking about. So I usually do. I mean, it helps a lot to have other people's points of view that you can hop to keep it fresh and show things going on that your main character maybe doesn't know about. But usually, I think in the published stuff I have out there, it's like chapter by chapter hopping instead of within the chapter.
But I can imagine also that is a yoke that you have to deal with, right? Like you can't, like you've got to stay with that person for the whole chapter. I know, for example, like, I cut my teeth in Thrones stuff. The fact that George R.R. Martin has certain POVs is a real structural problem for him a lot of times. And I imagine that's the same with any author.
He, I think, is a great person to learn how not to make work harder for yourself from. Like, I love, these books are amazing. I do learn a lot about just the craft of writing from James S.A. Corey. Like, there's stuff that is so hard to put together well that they do super smoothly. And the Game of Thrones books are so well written. Like, the prose is so beautiful, but he's created like a really top heavy, unwieldy situation. Yeah. And I didn't come up with this. A lot of people online are like, it's not coming out because he's written himself into a corner on so many things. Right. And when you have that many characters and that many plot lines and huge fan expectations too, I'm sure he's just like, Did you know that Ty Frank was his assistant for a while?
I did know that. Did you know that they dedicated Tiamat's Wrath to George R.R. Martin?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
He sounds fun.
And Tiamat's Wrath was the book where everyone dies. So that's the fun part.
Perfect. That's so nice.
Yeah.
That's so sweet of them. You'll like this, George.
So anyway, chapter 6 of The Mercy of Gods. Sorry, that was a digression. That's what you pay us for, folks. Anyway.
Getting your money's worth.
We get a smash cut to Daffod Alcor, who for some reason has waived his Sixth Amendment right to counsel and is talking to the cops without a lawyer. Don't do this, kids.
Not even in another galaxy.
He's got Sixth Amendment rights too. I believe that. They are inalienable or something.
Alienable, get it?
I do get it. I do. That's good.
Don't talk to cops.
Don't talk to cops. Anyway, he's doing a good job of it, though, because Daffod is very smooth. He does make the mistake of thinking that he'll be okay just because he's innocent. I don't know about that, Daffod. Still, he doesn't tell the security man much before his aunt pulls some strings to bail him out. His aunt gives him a ride home and seems preoccupied for some reason. What could it be? Don't know. And drops him off and just says, hey, take care of herself. And then the text notes that that's the last time Daffod saw her alive, which, oof.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun.
That's a classic horror storytelling. I mean, lots of things. It's a, cliffhanger, but in horror, it's always like, and then she died.
Yes. Well, and
guess how?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to sort of amp up the anticipation of what's going to happen. This is, in many ways, a horror story. The next part that we're going to hit next, whenever we publish the next episode, is super horrific and is some of the toughest things that I've read. And this is the beginning of that horror story. I mean, Live Suit, which we will talk about at some point, is a horror story.
It really is, like Alien.
Capital H horror. So I do want to hit, though, that it's the last time he saw her alive, which means that either Daffod never comes back to Anjiin, which I think he probably doesn't. Or if he does come back, she's already dead. I think he never comes back to Anjiin.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
But I also think even if she survived this whole situation and he made it back, because of the realities of light speed travel, it could be so many years later that she would be dead anyway. So sad.
Or what the people call FTL travel, which is faster than light. That's what the nerds call it.
Of course they do.
Yeah. Anyway, meanwhile, Rickar, good old dandy boy Rickar, is drinking his sorrows away. With Samar Ostead dead, he is right and properly fucked from a career perspective. So he was doing what I would do, which is get drunk. I respect that. But there's another reason why he's fucked from a career perspective. And the other barflies tell him to check the TV because there are 17 city-sized alien ships on the horizon. Rickar laughs and thinks, Tonner will be disappointed, which I love that.
Me too. That's when you have a really bad boss, you think of them all the time.
Yes, we have both had really bad bosses, and I did think of them all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 17 city-sized alien ships. Interesting.
It's probably just our brethren coming back to say hi.
Right. I mean, that's definitely what happens with 17 city-sized alien ships. Anyway, Cinia and Noel are in their house trying to act normal. So I want to set the scene here because Brigid and I live in the Bay Area. Brigid used to live in the Bay Area. I imagine Cinia and Noel as two, sort of crusty ex-hippies living in Berkeley.
Total Berkeley professors.
They wear Birkenstocks and have a, in this house we believe in science kind of sign on the front porch,
Yeah.
And really, Noel is really into jazz. That's what I think. They followed the Dead.
Free jazz.
Yeah, they followed the Dead for a while, but that's too busy these days. And Phil Lesh just died, so anyway, we get this from Noel's perspective. Noel is an older man, I'm guessing in his late 50s or 60s, and all poor Noel wants to do is tend garden and take care of Cinia. And instead, they've got 17 city-sized alien spaceships coming towards them, which is a lot. And they watch on the screen or whatever as the ship starts sort of shooting off spore-like things into space, which...
It's so scary.
And they're like, ha ha ha. Noel makes a joke, maybe they're coming to pollinate us. And it's like, oh, buddy. And we now know that those spore-like things are the Carrick's animals of violence that are being shot off to attack. And they're also their sort of grid satellites. That's what we know. So anyway, this seems really bad. And Cinia says that she hopes the security forces don't do anything too aggressive in response. Which, oh my God.
Oh, sweet angel babies. These two are so well characterized. I feel like you go to Berkeley and you meet them.
Yep. And I mean, that line is so ironic because it literally does not matter what the security forces do.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They could roll out the red carpet and or fire off every, nuclear missile equivalent directly at them, and the exact same thing is going to happen.
It's so she assumes kind of rightfully that the humans will do something to fuck it all up as we normally do.
Mm-hmm.
And also just still believing that the 17 city-sized alien spaceships are there for good or something. Like, she's like, I'm sure they're coming in peace. If we don't fuck this up, we might be okay.
Right. Or anything other than murderous conquest, right? If they're just coming to, like, I don't know, say hello, or, I don't know, negotiate, like, do you send 17 city-sized spaceships? Probably not.
I wouldn't. Seems like a waste.
Yeah. So then, finally, we are now in the lab with Tonner, Else, Campar, and David. And Tonner is mad.
Once again, Rickar was right.
That's right. He's mad that no one else in the team is there. No one else from the team responded to his summons. And Campar says, quote, "The most important thing in the history of the world is happening. People might be a little distracted." And Campar, as always, is right. And yet, Tonner is still very concerned with cementing the work group, which, but Else slash the swarm notices that their feeds of the ship are being censored. I don't know if Else notices this because they're the swarm or that they could have figured this out anyway, but that's what they notice. And that seems bad, right? It's not a great sign. And this indicates to the swarm that the attack is soon to begin. So Else slash the swarm suggests that everybody goes back to Else's place because there's a telescope or something. In reality, I think that this is just the swarm trying to put everyone that they can in one place, the best that they can. Tonner says no, and to take David because Tonner is a little man baby. And David and then Else swarm. Get it? See what I did there?
I do. I like it.
They go back to Elsa's place. Elsa's place happens to be a man-made structure, not one that was grown, like most of the buildings on Anjiin. And I'm betting Else thinks that this will afford them more protection. David tells Else that he has, something potentially inappropriate to tell her. He gets his bravery up. He's gonna make a move, and then he steels himself up to take his big swing at the girl he has a crush on, but then he chickens out. Poor David. However, Else, the swarm, then kisses him. And here's the quote. "It tasted like salt and smoke. Something rumbled, deep as thunder or an earthquake. In the distance, alarms began to shriek." Boom.
So beautiful.
That's the end of part 1 before.
Do you think it tastes like salt because she likes pickles so much?
Maybe the swarm is salty. I don't know.
Maybe. Okay, so David decides not to, but I really feel like he reads something in my theory about this moment is that Else herself was going to turn him down and was glad that he was backing off, but the swarm was like not that Else was totally uninterested and the swarm made her do it, but that she was going to go with her better judgment, and the swarm was like, actually, it would be super great if David was our boyfriend.
And, using sort of Else's feminine wiles to control David, probably. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know, though. Sometimes you just want a younger man.
Sometimes you just want a man who's not fucking Tonner Freis.
Seriously. Oh, when I heard that she needs some girlfriends.
Seriously.
Tonner, you can't give up your own lab and your own project and then move in with this man to be a junior to him? Come on.
No. Yeah, where are Elsa's girlfriends? What is happening here?
She needs to take her power back, and she's going to.
She is, as a matter of fact. Okay, so we had a very good discussion, and I want to sort of reprise it to the best we can. Brigid texted me while she was reading this book, and she was like, "Who would you cast for each of the characters?"
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
Okay, so initially I was like, I could totally see David Tennant as Tonner.
Sure.
And Saoirse Ronan as Else.
Great. Love that.
And then I was like, young Anthony Michael Hall, who is one of the, he's like the prototypical nerd in all the John Hughes movies. And I just see him as David a little bit. He's got that kind of charming, but so nerdy, but also puppy doggish thing. So then you were like, we could do a whole Brat Pack casting, and what did you say?
Okay, so here's my Brat Pack casting. The Brat Pack, if people don't know what the Brat Pack is, I mean, Google it. Google is free. But it's basically the 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, Sex Lies and Videotape era, late 80s, John Hughes and some other people, those types of movies. So here's my Brat Pack casting if we're gonna put The Mercy of Gods in the Brat Pack. Anthony Michael Hall as David, easy, absolutely. Tonner Freis is Andrew McCarthy, for sure, who can play that sort of self-important piece of shit that Andrew McCarthy is. Else, obviously Molly Ringwald. They mention a couple of times that Else is strawberry blonde or auburn hair. I picture her as more like blonde, but...
I do too, but I wonder if it's just that her name's Else, and that's like a very Germanic name.
Yeah, I think that's right. Jessen, clearly Ali Sheedy.
100%. Hands
100%,
down.
you know? Like, and the early Ali Sheedy in Breakfast Club, not the later, like, cleaned up Ali Sheedy. It's like the shaggy hair Ali Sheedy.
Yeah.
Rickar is Emilio Estevez. I've got Emilio Estevez as Rickar. And I've got Campar as Judd Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
And look, the things that we know about Campar is that he is huge, he is hilarious, and he is very gay. I don't know that Judd Nelson can play very gay. I believe that he can, but that's the best I can do. And then Jellet is Robert Downey Jr.
For sure.
Or maybe Robert Downey Jr. is Campar, because Robert Downey Jr. Can play gay.
Yes, and he is funny.
And he is funny. So maybe that's what we do. And then we switch.
And then they would just CGI him to be bigger.
Oh, that's right. He's just bigger. My real casting for Campar is Coleman Domingo, who is a beautiful man, who is huge.
Yes.
And very gay. And
he's a large boy.
I think would be perfect as Campar. So Coleman Domingo, have your agent call James S.A. if you're listening to this, which I'm sure that he is.
Everyone involved, Coleman Domingo's agent, James S.A. Corey, and Coleman Domingo himself are all listening to this podcast.
Sure, for sure.
Wondering, hoping.
Yeah, so that's my casting. I also thought of Timothée Chalamet as Daffod. I realize, so it's a little bit cheating. So Daniel Abraham has also called this book, this story, The Disappointing Love Child of Frank Herbert and Ursula Le Guin. And so, like, I think it's an interesting contrast. You know, they're trying to invoke a lot of Dune ideas, and I think Daffod is clearly the Paul Atreides character, and so, you know, Timothée is Paul Atreides in the Daniel Villeneuve movies, which are very good, I think.
I love them too.
They're some of the Dunier things that I've seen, but I think it's an interesting contrast. We were talking about this previously about. So The Expanse is like what I would imagine their love letter to George R.R. Martin, but also William Gibson and Robert Heinlein, and, you know, probably several other sci-fi novelists that I'm not thinking of at the moment. But this is a different type of story where you get, rather than sort of ultra POV driven and like really a human story like The Expanse is. The Expanse, I think that the like sort of overall takeaway from The Expanse that I got was that humanity is the cause of and solution to all of our problems. I think that this is a non-human story intentionally, and a bigger story like Dune is, and like many of Ursula Le Guin stories are.
I totally agree. I think that The Expanse is very much about humans on Earth going into the rest of the solar system. And then this is definitely leaning bigger, grander, and about what it means to be human, what it means to even be alive, what sentience is. We both recently read The Left Hand of Darkness, which is another inspiration for this novel. And do you feel like do you saw the parallels, or?
I do. And I think that, so Left Hand of Darkness is it's an interesting sci-fi book in the sense that, you know, there's not like space battles or anything like that. It's just like about, for folks who haven't read Left Hand of Darkness, I mean, do it. it's an incredible book, but it's basically about like an envoy from a intergalactic society who is trying to bring this planet of people into the intergalactic society. And the planet of people are completely androgynous. In fact, they change sex all the time, or at least on a monthly basis. And like they're so it's an exploration of like what it means to be human and how that differs from gender.
Right. Like how much does gender impact the way that we're human?
Totally. And I think so you get at least some discussion of the Carricks, and the Carricks seem to be a genderless society. I mean, the sovereign is sort of obliquely referred to as female, I think, but like nobody talks about like none of the Carricks talk about, you know, I mean, I don't know how they reproduce. I don't believe we ever learn how they reproduce, but it seems like a genderless society. Everybody is sort of he. And so I think that there is going to be some exploration of that, if not with the Carricks, then some of the other sort of slave races that we meet, right?
Yeah. And not just gender, but also what else makes, like, how do we relate to beings whose life form is so different from ours that it's hard to find any common ground. And I think this all comes up later, of course, but the Carricks have invented this technology that is one of the biggest things that makes this not hard sci-fi is the translator boxes.
Oh my God.
It somehow can take communication that's like sent poems and turn it into language you can understand, which I love. Of course, we're going to talk about that tons in the upcoming episodes. But yeah, Left Hand of Darkness is a stranger in a strange land type of sci-fi versus like exploring or adventuring, which to some extent, so is this.
Right, exactly. That's what this is. I mean, all of the later chapters are stranger in a strange land. Like, that's very much that. It's also Book of Daniel. Like, there's parts of the Book of Daniel, I'm told by Daniel Abraham in a speech that he gave recently, where like Daniel is remarking on how he's never seen a building over 2 stories. You know, like he's never been in a city with plumbing and those sorts of things.
Yeah, he's like a poor hick basically that gets taken to Babylon.
Right, exactly. And so like that's the rest of this book is the poor hicks of Anjiin being taken to the Babylon of wherever the fuck the Carricks are with all of the ziggurats and whatnot.
Their world sounds so cool.
Oh my God.
Going back for one sec to the Carricks gender situation, we will probably talk about this a lot again later, but so Ekur-Tkalal refers to himself as it.
Yep.
And I guess, doesn't, it's so hard to say it. That's what we call things that aren't human. So Ekur-Tkalal refers to its like natal creche and its cohort, and it seems as though their society is based on the eusocial model, which is what bees have, where there's one reproductive female, several reproductive males, and then everyone else is an asexual worker. And it also refers to reproductiveness being like a certain caste level in their society.
Yep.
So if you are basically busted down too many levels, you're no longer gendered, which is fascinating. I hope we learn so much more. I want to know everything about the Carricks. I want to read their Wikipedia.
The Carrickspedia?
I want to read Carrickspedia.
Yeah, okay. Anything else on Ekur-Tkalal that we should hit?
I forgot we were talking about him being a little bitch, but he is one.
He is. He's like saucy. He's like all about telling the tea, as they say, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's just like really bitter about a lot of things. I really like it. Especially given the notion that this is a whole race where you're not supposed to have individualized ideas, but he clearly does.
Yes.
And so I just think that's an interesting contrast.
I think it's going to be really interesting to learn more about how individual the Carricks are and how many of them have these thoughts and feelings, and if they're allowed to have them or if he's like making thought crimes.
Yeah.
Like, is he also kind of exceptional among the Carricks as we're being led to believe Daffod is among the humans?
Or is this a situation where it's just societally among the Carricks, you're not supposed to, have these sorts of feelings, and so nobody verbalizes them, but
Right.
but everybody does.
Right.
I don't know.
Is it The Giver, or is it, what's that one? Stepford Wives.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
We'll find out, I hope. So let's talk about your best friend in the whole world / galaxy / universe, Campar.
Yes.
What's your favorite Campar line?
From this part, I've got a couple. And the first one is where they're all trying to figure out who did the thing where they sold out the research group. And somebody's like, maybe it's Rickar, but how are we going to know? And Campar says, I hate to jump to conclusions. I think it's only professional that we find him and beat the truth out of him. Just that sort of dry wit. That hits me that hits me in my favorite spots. I love that shit.
It's dry as a martini.
And then there's a part where I think later in the same chapter where, Tonner is ranting and raving about something about what's going to happen next. And Daffod notes that Campar looks at him and mouths silently, Daddy's angry.
I love that. Your Campar voice is really good, by the way.
That's my best impression of Jefferson Mays' Campar voice, which I also really love. He puts some bass into it, which I like.
He does.
Yeah.
He's such a good voice actor.
So, Brigid, we're at this point after the first part, before, and I want to hit this. So initially, Brigid and I were talking about doing this podcast, and one of the ideas that we floated was I was going to read the whole thing, and Brigid was going to read just up to a point, and then we were going to do an episode on it. That was one of the ideas. And then I got a text, I think probably when you got to this point, that was like, I'm not going to be able to stop reading. And so I appreciate that, because I wouldn't have been able to either. And so now you finished it. But at this point, what did you think was going to happen?
Well, this is such a crazy moment because you realize that almost all the plot that you've learned so far is not the real plot. Mm-hmm. Like, only a couple things that happen end up actually being to be concerned about in the future. So I was like, okay, this guy's dead. That seems relevant, but I'm not sure what that could possibly have to do with the rest of this. And then it was clear the aliens, the 17 city-sized ships weren't there for like funsies. But I was like, what is going to happen? What does this have to do with the very first thing that spoiled everything? It turns out it didn't spoil everything because I still have no idea what's going on. I for some reason immediately became very attached to Daffod and was like, anything but him, please save Daffod.
Okay. I appreciate that.
I don't know why. How do you feel? I feel like maybe you don't love Daffod as much as I do.
No, I mean, I think I see Daffod as, or maybe I'm a little bit wary of Daffod because I read him as Paul Atreides, and maybe that's unfair. What I should say is that the interiority of Daffod is very like politically active, and his primary strength at this point is that he can read people and figure out what they want and how to extract what he wants from them. And that is a quality that I wish I didn't think was one of my stronger parts. Like I relate to Daffod a lot. Maybe like I when I'm reading Daffod chapters, I'm like, yeah, I get this too much, and maybe I shouldn't. And I think part of that is because this is a love letter to Frank Herbert, and like Daffod has burned. We learned from Ekur-Tkalal, who is clearly not a reliable narrator in any way, that he has burned galaxies and worlds. So maybe like Daffod's a good guy. I doubt it, given what we know about and when I say good guy, I mean he's not like all good. He's not Naomi Nagata, right?
Oh, I mean,
right? He's not James Holden.
Who
I don't think.
Among Us.
Right? He's
No.
not he's not one of these guys who is like, this is our protagonist. He's our Jon Snow. He's our good guy. He's our hero who is going to save the universe. I don't think that's the story that they're telling here. I think that given what we know from the end of this book and what we know from Live Suit, more on this next episode, that we're going to find out that Daffod, in order to win this war, is going to do some horrible things. And we are going to have to wrestle with the ethical implications of whether what he did was worth it. I'm super down for that conversation. I'm really interested in it. But I'm wary of being like, Daffod's my guy. Whereas, especially when I have Campar, this beautiful, hilarious gay man right there, who I want to spend time with, who I like want to go to drinks with in the Castro so badly. That's my vibe so far.
Okay. And where did you think, when you first read this part, where did you think the story was going from here?
I didn't know. So I certainly was not prepared for the amount of horror that we're going to get in the next episode. I was not prepared at all. And it is going to be horrific, and I'm excited to cover it with you. But I did not think it was going to get as gory as it does. And then I thought we were going to get an invasion. I knew we were going to get an invasion because that was how this book was sold. But I did not expect it to be a situation where I thought it would be sort of a more, I don't know, we're joining up with the good guys' forces and we're going to take down the bad guys. And I've read some other... Like
Independence Day.
Independence Day, yeah. I thought it was going to be more like Independence Day. There's going to be a speech from the president, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's what I thought. I was wrong. I'm happy to be.
Yeah, this is such a more interesting... I mean, I love Independence Day, obviously. But it's a story that's been told. This is a new thing.
Yeah, I'm excited. Anything else we want to hit before we get going?
Nope.
All right. Well, that was fun. It was super fun. This is the second time we've recorded this episode. And so I think it was better the second time. I like it. Yeah. Anyway, come back next time when we cover part 2 of The Mercy of Gods, Catastrophe. And folks, there's going to be so much catastrophe. But I'm sure that everything will work out just fine. It's going to be fun.
I, for one, think the 17 alien ships are just here to hang out.
Yeah.
They brought us some cupcakes, maybe.
Like a casserole?
A casserole, exactly. A hot dish.
Yeah.
You can follow The Mercy of Pods on Buzzsprout or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also send us an email at themercyofpods@gmail.com or follow us on the socials at The Mercy of Pods. Our logo is by Matt House, and our music is Push the Button by Sid Luscious and the Pants, available wherever you get your music.
Yep, good band. I like them. All right, see you next time.
Bye.
Push the button.